Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Kia ora, Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, it is Raiders week yet again, baby. The Chargers will be facing off against the Vegas Raiders this Sunday, this time in Allegiant Stadium, which might shock you guys. The Chargers actually perform very well versus the Raiders on the road. And this game, dudes, I'm thinking is going to get kind of crazy. We're going to go through what I think is going to happen here, but quick shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. We're going to have them help me with my point here. Take a look at my slip for Sunday, dudes. I'm going in 5 picks. I'm not even putting insurance on it. I feel like this game could get absolutely nuts, and I think my picks here might be able to help prove that. If you guys want to get in on the action, sure, maybe you can use the insurance or less picks or whatever you guys want to do. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. Get in on the action that way. Again, I think this game's going to get pretty nuts, and with the Chargers now at 6-5, the Raiders at 4-7, this game carries a lot of consequences going forward. We're looking at a door that may be open to the Raiders to try and jump the Chargers for second place in the AFC West. We cannot let that happen. There's a lot of consequences in this game, and the Chargers, this may have turned into a must-win scenario. So should be a pretty interesting one in this one, guys. Now, before we do get started, another announcement. We do have a giveaway going on right now. We're giving away this Justin Herbert jersey to one of my subscribers. All I got to do to enter for that is hit up the link in the description. Follow the instructions there. Super simple, and make sure you are subscribed. Only subs can win. Additionally, we always do giveaways in 2s on this channel. We're also giving away this Khalil Mack jersey to one of my crew members. All you got to do to be entered for that is be a member of my crew, and that is it. All right, guys, let's get into this crazy game. Before we do, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, the small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into Raiders week, baby. Lights, camera, action. The Chargers at Raiders week 13 game preview. This game could get pretty nutty, man. Let's start things off with the norm here at the injury report. Who's playing, who's sitting? I would say there's some good and bad news here for Chargers fans. Raiders fans alike too. Raiders are actually maybe a bit more banged up than the Chargers are at this point, which is pretty crazy to say. I do know they have some returning pieces coming in, but some important information here before we do get into the nitty-gritty. So let's start up here at the top. We got Nasir Adderley, who is questionable. I think JT Woods has been playing in his stead. We did see a bit of a scare with Bryce Callahan and Derwin James, both getting not practices early in the week. Looks like it was more of a rest day, not confirmed, but just keep an eye on that. These guys have been practicing in full. They should be active that game, as is Michael Davis. Corey Linsley, this is a big one I wanted to point out here. In concussion protocol still, he has been listed as out for Sunday. And if you guys have taken a look at the Chargers in terms of their offense, it feels like they put up way better stats when Corey Linsley is in. Of course, pass protecting assignments and all that kind of stuff, very important. Corey Linsley being out will be felt for the Bolts. Additionally, out is Trey Pipkins, the Chargers' right tackle. This could spell disaster versus a guy like Max Crosby. Hopefully, I think it's Sewell that's going to be coming in, or Foster Sorrell. We wish we had Sewell. Foster Sorrell, hopefully he can just hold down the fort for another game here, but that's going to be very interesting. He should be seeing a lot of Jamari Sawyer as well, who did practice in full, by the way. Drew Tranquil, questionable. Hopefully he does suit up. We're going to need him. And then lastly, Mike Williams, probably the biggest one on this list, listed as out as far as Chargers fans wondering if he will be playing. Mike Williams will not be playing, but I still do think the Chargers have a decent shot of attacking through the air. We'll go over that in just a second. As for the Raiders, we'll go over this one pretty quick. They haven't submitted their Friday injury report yet. Probably the biggest one on this list being Josh Jacobs, who's been limited all week. I would say that he's trending towards playing, and I'm going to address him in this video as he is playing, because this is definitely the biggest threat we have to dropping this game versus, we'll say, the league's leading rusher, Josh Jacobs, at this point. He's been absolutely crazy this week. Did not practice, was backup tight end. Limited Denzel Perryman. He's always pretty good in the not practice. Defensive tackle Vickers. Other than that, looks like they should be seeing the rest of these guys back this week, but do keep in mind they are missing other pieces like Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, etc., that I think are on IR, not listed here on the injury report. So there's what you got to look forward to in terms of who's suiting up on Sunday. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this game. And I will say, maybe to any Raiders fans watching, mainly for the Chargers fans, this is going to be a head-to-head battle. I would say that I think both sides definitely understand the consequences of this game. If you win and you're a Raiders fan, you're one game behind the Chargers, could try and threaten for second place. We're hoping that doesn't happen. If you're a Chargers fan, a win here could maybe shut the door on that possibility, and that's really what we're hoping for, while also helping the Chargers' postseason hopes stay alive. And at this point, you're going to need as many wins as you can get your hands on. So let's jump into the first topic I want to discuss here in this matchup for the Chargers. This segment called a Herbert Slice and Dice Arena. Now, Herbert is looking like his old self again, I think, for the past couple of weeks. And for Chargers fans, that's extremely exciting. There was a good 4 or 5 week period in the season where he was obviously very hammered by the rib injury, and it really sucked to see the old Herbert kind of be put to the side for a while as he was playing a little bit hobbled. Now he is back to full health, it seems like, and this is bad news for his favorite opponent, I would say, in the Vegas Raiders, because the Raiders are extremely vulnerable through the air. As they started at the top of the season, it seems like they have remained, at this point of the year, a bad secondary. Now, they do have some nice pieces in there. Trevon Moehrig, Nate Hobbs, who might be back this week. He, again, wasn't listed on the injury report here, but I do think there were some complications of whether or not he would return this game from a previous injury. And as I'm hearing right now, it might be a possibility that he returns for this one, but still, even if he does, their secondary is pretty thin. That would be more of a Nate Hobbs versus Keenan Allen matchup, if you guys are wondering. Nate Hobbs being one of the better slot corners in the NFL. And you guys want to know something else, too, in terms of Justin Herbert and his performances versus the Raiders? That's why I labeled him as one of his favorite opponents. Herbert has never thrown for less than 300 yards, and I think he has 3 total touchdowns in those games at Allegiant Stadium. Of course, only playing twice at this point. Insanity. Insanity. As a matter of fact, his last 2 away games versus the Raiders, he's totaled 712 yards and 6 combined touchdowns. That is absolutely absurd. And I think he only had like 15 rushing yards in those games. Of course, one of those, I think, I was in, like you're seeing on that, thus the touchdown there. But my goodness, is Justin Herbert great at Allegiant Stadium, which is absolutely fantastic to hear going into this week. That does have a lot of consequences in terms of win or a loss. And you know what? With Keenan Allen back, the offense is finally starting to find their rhythm. As a matter of fact, it feels like the strength of this team is kind of starting to flip, right? Where the offense is now starting to become healthy. They're looking like the more dominant side of the ball, and the defense has been struggling as of late. But against an opponent like the Raiders, having a strong offense, very important, because they too do also have a very good offense that you need to compete with. But I would suspect Herbert is in for a pretty huge day on Sunday. And I would expect Herbert to find the end zone at least twice, maybe tally over 300 yards like he's been so consistently with the Raiders. He'll have to keep up with the Raiders' predominant running attack to do so, and I think LA's best chances are to let Herbert do his thing. So in terms of exciting football, I think from a quarterback perspective, it should be a pretty exciting day for, I would say, even both teams. I think Derek Carr has definitely been having a pretty good month, which does kind of lead me to, what we were talking about right here. Hopefully we do see a Derek Carr interception. We'll get to that part here in just a second. But again, this is why I feel the way I feel with this particular entry here. And this is why I'm going pretty heavy in terms of no insurance, all that kind of stuff. Feel pretty confident on that. We'll explain more of this as we go. So pay attention to this. It'll all come back here in just a second. So definitely going to be interesting to see Justin Herbert get to work. I will end the Herbert segment on this note, though. Without Corey Linsley and Trey Pipkins, this game is going to be much more challenging for Justin Herbert, because Mad Max, he's out there, and he's going to become just that much more threatening without that tackle on the side. I think he'll face more Jamari Sawyer than not, but if I were the Raiders, I would try and take advantage of that matchup 10 out of 10 times. So you got to watch out for that side of the ball. This course, maybe playing at the right tackle. That's going to be tough. But even tougher without Corey Linsley, who's definitely one of the best in calling blocking assignments. It's going to be tough out there. But even with that sort of pressure that I do now expect at this point, now with those 2 players being out, I still feel like Herbert is far and away your best option to lean on. So be excited about the quarterback performance. I think we're going to see some fun action out there on Sunday. Next up, this next segment called Keenan and Eckler. Now, last week, we saw the utilization of the Chargers' best players, and I do think that ultimately led to the win for the Chargers. If you're going to lean on your superstars, I think like good things are going to happen, especially when you got injuries all over the roster. Make the stars you have on the field work, and we absolutely did that last week versus the Cardinals. Now I think it's time just to run it back. Eckler, he has been solid over his last 2 road games versus the Raiders. Okay, we'll cover Austin Eckler first. Around 100 total yards each contest, 2 touchdowns. Looking pretty good. However, I will say the Raiders, they have some decent games defending him as well. I would not say 50. I think Austin Eckler, for the most part, has been better, but the Raiders aren't that kind of team where I've felt that Austin Eckler goes crazy all over consistently. He's been very good, and I do expect him to be pretty good, but the Raiders have done some good jobs containing him in the past, so just kind of keep that in mind. They cannot shut him down, though, completely. I don't think in any contest in the past they've completely shut him out. So I do expect him to have a good day, around 100 yards, maybe a score, but he is very much so going to be involved in this game overall, especially with Mike Williams being out. May see a bit more slot work for number 30 out there. Now let's talk about Keenan on the other hand. So I do expect Eckler to have a decent day. There's a chance that he busts out and have a huge day, especially through the air. But I think the Raiders, in their history, have done a pretty decent job at not letting too many games get away from them in terms of defending Austin Eckler. But he could still pop off. He's that kind of player. Keenan, on the other hand, he might see another day as what we'll call like a clutch hermit, right? That veteran that just goes out there and does his thing. But I unfortunately do need to point out that the Raiders, they've made it their focus to shut down Keenan Allen for their last several matchups. I don't think Keenan's had a 100-yard day versus Vegas since like 2020. Still, you never know, but it's very evident that the Raiders, in their exposure and time played against Keenan Allen, it's very obvious that that's one of their like circled players on their week, saying, hey man, we got to slow down number 13. If he gets loose, if he goes crazy, we have a lesser shot at winning this game. And so far through the history of the Chargers matchups versus the Raiders, it's evident via his statage that that's kind of the case. But does that mean that Keenan Allen's going to have a bad day? Absolutely not. I think Keenan Allen could certainly have a good day, because you really never know with a star like this, especially coming back from injury. We'll say a bit fresher than other receivers on this roster. You never know. But in the end, I think he's going to do what he does, right? Keenan's drives have been crazy in terms of keeping, drives alive is what I should say. And this is starting to open things up for other receivers as well. Sure, we haven't been seeing crazy statage. I think close to 100 yards a couple weeks ago, like 50 yards last week. But in those plays, he has been very, very important to the overall game's health offensively. And I think he's going to be doing the same thing on Sunday. But more importantly, like I said, keeping things open for other receivers. That's going to be playing a big part in the Chargers offensively this week. So I would expect a reasonable day for Keenan Allen. Maybe 8 or 9 catches, around 70 yards, maybe a touchdown, but it's Keenan. He could definitely pop off if he finds a rhythm, even versus the Raiders, who have historically the last couple of years been pretty good at holding him down. All right. So those are your 2 stars. We want to lean on them, obviously, but I do think there's a secret element to this game offensively for the Chargers. So we know we got to lean on Justin Herbert. We know Austin Eckler could have a pretty solid to great day. We know Keenan Allen could have a pretty solid to great day. But the biggest thing that I'm excited to see about the Chargers offensively this week is in this segment called the lurking depth. Now, this is where things get interesting, okay? With Keenan and Eckler having decent days, where is Herbert going to find his bulk of passing yards this week? Well, I've got 2 players specifically in mind here, okay? We're going to start now with Gerald Everett. Now, the Raiders have been historically bad versus the Chargers starting tight ends. Last game, Gerald Everett popped off in his Chargers debut, his first game ever as a Los Angeles Charger. He got 3 receptions for 54 yards and a touchdown. All right, nothing crazy, but definitely the golf clap respectable. But now that Everett is out of his first game in powder blue, it's going to be several games down the road in his career as a Charger. I think things have solidified just a little bit more. But even before that, at the tight end position, we had Jared Cook for 1 season, right? And he was putting in work as well versus the Raiders. 150 yards and a score in his 2 games versus Vegas as a Charger. I think at that point, it's pretty evident that the Chargers' tight ends are definite red zone threats versus the Raiders for whatever reason, and they're going to put up a decent amount of yardage. That tight end position, extremely important, maybe even key for the Chargers' offense in this week's matchup. And I could see this week maybe even being Everett's best of the year. You could even talk me into a career best game for Gerald Everett. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Everett go for, let's say, spitballing here, like over 80 yards and a touchdown. You could even sneak in a second touchdown. I wouldn't be too shocked. I think he's going to be your best red zone threat in terms of a weapon over the middle for Justin Herbert in the red zone. So I don't know, man. I think Gerald Everett, he's going to be one of those guys I think we heavily lean on. And maybe, again, not your number 1 or 2 guys on the offense, but he could certainly be that presence that the Chargers need to expose that Raiders' poor secondary. So I really like that. I really like Gerald Everett. I think he's going to have a big day. The other player I think comes to nobody's shock is going to be Josh Palmer, all right, who's now officially, I can pretty much say confidently, officially on his breakout tour this season, right? And I think he's a huge X factor this week in terms of how the Raiders are going to defend the Chargers offense. Now, his last game versus the Raiders was also pretty good, but just like Gerald Everett, it was pretty fresh in terms of Josh Palmer's exposure in the Chargers offense, right? I think one of his first few starts to start the season off in 2022, the first start in his second year as a Chargers is what we'll say. And since then, Josh Palmer's been kind of going nuts, right? His last game versus the Raiders, before I get too far off, he caught 4 balls for 45 yards and a score. His first game in top of the Chargers depth chart as far as wide receiver. That was pretty good, right? But again, since then, he's been putting in some good work. That was the old Palmer. This new Palmer, since being handed the wide receiver 2 and even 1 responsibilities, Palmer has produced over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in his last 4 games combined. That's nuts. There was a lot of responsibility there with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams both out, and Josh Palmer has stepped up. And what's crazy is that he gets even better with the returning stars coming back. With Keenan Allen now back and drawing coverage, the rest of the Raiders secondary is very poor, and this is opening up opportunity for Josh Palmer to do his thing. So I wouldn't be shocked if Josh Palmer goes out there and puts up another 100-plus yard performance, maybe even leading all receivers for the Chargers this week. Again, the Raiders' primary focus, try and shut down Keenan Allen. It's just going to leave Josh Palmer out there with some nice matchups. So I think Palmer and Everett are going to be those secret weapons lurking in the depth for the Chargers to take advantage of offensively, especially versus this poor secondary. Now, next up, this next segment called A Car Wreck. Didn't get too creative. I don't think I needed to after finding this picture. This is solid gold on the internet here, folks. Now, I will say, though, Derek Carr, like I mentioned at the top of the show, he's been performing pretty good over the last month, okay? Between 250 and 300 yards per game, it's pretty obvious that he's on a heater right now. And this is something that the Chargers secondary is just going to have to figure out. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, it feels like there's a switch going on right now, right? Where the offense is starting to perform very well with those returning talent, the returning stars coming back to the lineup, and the defense is starting to find some struggle for whatever reason. And that's something that we're going to have to figure out this week because we don't want to continue this Carr, heater that's been going on over the last 4 weeks. Can we find that game where we shut him down to under 250 yards? Possibly. But it's going to be very tough because they have a very healthy running attack. Now, they've been declining in their performance over the last few games as far as the Chargers defense. We're going to have to see that bounce back game this week to figure that out, though, to sort it out. Because last game, we saw Carr in week 1, right? And we allowed 295 yards and 2 touchdowns. I felt like our secondary was pretty good back then. We still allowed that. But again, I did give the Raiders credit as far as being a very powerful passing attack back then. And this is something that I wouldn't be shocked to see again this week. I think we might see a lot offensively from the Raiders. However, we do have a great beat on Derek Carr, though. If you guys are asking, Director, what's the secret weapon in terms of getting to Derek Carr? Well, it's his reaction versus pressure. Exactly what we're seeing right here. Last meeting, the Chargers forced 5 sacks, which in turn caused 3 interceptions. Was it 5 sacks? I think it was 5 sacks. That's absolutely nuts. And this week, the plan needs to remain the same. Wreck Derek Carr. Get him uncomfortable because as Joey Bosa said, he just kind of starts to fold under pressure. He starts making bad decisions. Now, we won't have Bosa this week like we did our first matchup, but this still does play a huge factor in how to slow them down or at least cause some mistakes to swing the advantage to the Bolts. Now, I don't know, man. Surprisingly, with Joey Bosa's sideline, I felt like this season would be kaput in terms of pressure, even though we did have Khalil Mack. What the Chargers have done to supplement a Joey Bosa being missing right now is using Derwin James more on the edge, the X position. And that's really working out for the Chargers these last few weeks. Sure, we're not leading the league in sacks or anything, but we're there. We're there in the face of the quarterback, causing pressure more consistently than not. And I feel like that's something we got to lean on again this week because the Raiders are not great at keeping Derek Carr upright. Sack after sack after sack, week after week after week. I'm betting that Staley is aiming to take advantage of that. So Derwin James, Khalil Mack, that's what you got to be looking at. And again, we cannot forget Khalil Mack. He posted 3 sacks alone against his former team in week 1. That was huge, and I'm sure he's hungry to get back out there and take another bite out of Carr. Sure, again, it may be tougher to get to Carr without Bosa, but I do see the combination of Mack and Derwin as a lethal combo as well. Now that they've kind of figured that out, I cannot wait to see Joey Bosa back here in the next week or two, hopefully, crossing our fingers. Now, I would hope to see the Bolts post, let's say, 3 to 4 sacks this game. I think that's what their potential is at this point without Joey Bosa, and that's still pretty high, right? But if they can accomplish this, I'd almost guarantee at least 1 interception from Derek Carr. Sure, Derek Carr hasn't been throwing a ton of picks lately, but the Chargers are a division opponent, an opponent that knows them well, and an opponent that's not going to be afraid to throw the pressure at him. And that's why, again, I go back to the underdog. This is why I'm taking a big risk on the higher at 0.5 interceptions, because I just feel like the Chargers' plan of attack defensively is going to be getting to Derek Carr, and I think that could cause a mistake on his end, maybe force an interception. So again, educated guess, but a guess nonetheless, and I do think it's going to be something interesting to keep in front of us. Next up, this next segment, and probably the biggest one that Chargers fans have been waiting for me to talk about, the elephant in the room, Josh Jacobs. So far, right, in the video, things are looking great for the Chargers odds, right? But there's one thing that could throw this entire thing off track, and that is Josh Jacobs, which again, this photo I think speaks volumes into how the Chargers have been handling the run defense this season. Now, Jacobs right now is the league's leading rusher coming into week 13. Insanity, right? I feel like there was rumors about him getting cut by the Raiders this offseason. Here he is leading all running backs in rushing yards. Absolutely insane. You know what? He just popped off last week versus Seattle. 229 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. That's wild. But what's even more wild is that you add another 74 yards through the air for Josh Jacobs as well. Wow. That's insane. And honestly, yeah, as a Chargers fan, I'm a bit worried about number 28. Now, you add on top of that the Chargers are a bottom of the league run defense. I feel like you guys see where I'm getting at here. We're in for a very long day defensively, and I feel like we're going to be very frustrated in terms of the Chargers, you know, getting off the field on 3rd down, stopping big runs over the middle. I just don't know. I think it's going to be a long day. Now, the last time the Chargers did face Josh Jacobs, though, I will say in terms of a little bit of optimism, they did a great job containing him. I think something like 57 yards on the ground, nothing too crazy. But I just can't believe that'll be the case on Sunday. I'm sorry. I'm hoping the Chargers defense figures it out, and this is like that one anomaly game where it's like, hey, man, we didn't go crazy in terms of our run defense. It wasn't anything spectacular, but, man, he didn't pop off for 200 yards. Well, the Chargers have allowed 702 yards combined over their last 4 games on the ground. 702 yards. I don't know if that spells much confidence even for Chargers fans. And that's an average of over 170 yards or 175 yards per game in the last 4 games. That is absolutely unacceptable, and it's going to be a factor this game, and it's going to bite us in the butt. With Jacobs standing right in front of us, this could get very, very ugly. Now, of course, like at the top of the show, we're not quite certain what his role is going to be, if he's even going to be suiting up this game, but we have to treat it as if he is. And even his backups could put in some pretty big work for the Raiders, with the Chargers defense looking as bad as it is. So I would say your only hope at countering, because I don't think you're going to stop Josh Jacobs. I think the only hope that you have of countering Josh Jacobs this week is keeping points flowing. Very short and simple. Because I'm already counting on Jacobs scoring at least a few times, right? He's that good this season, and the Chargers are just that bad on the ground this season. You just got to stay ahead. That's it. Just got to stay ahead. Make the Raiders think twice about running instead of passing. I think that's really all you can do. But even then, I'm not sure that's going to work. Because we've seen opponents, they've been unafraid to run the ball and hand it off. Even when they're losing or in close games, they just hand it off because they know the Chargers can't stop it. So I would expect around, yes, like a 200-yard game for Josh Jacobs this week, which is insane. Back-to-back crazy weeks for number 28. The Chargers are just going to have to help themselves by leaning on Justin Herbert to keep him up, to keep him ahead. But at this point, I think you just got to plan for the run defense to be as bad as they have been and try and make up for it in other areas of your offense and defense. That's kind of it. So expect a big day by Josh Jacobs. Hopefully the Chargers can keep up on the scoreboard. Lastly, I will say, this segment called Get Ready for Fireworks. I think this is going to be a crazy game in my opinion. Because if you take like a wide picture, a big picture look at both of these teams, we're kind of yin-yang with the Raiders in terms of strengths and weaknesses, right? The Chargers, horrible run defense, powerful passing attack. The Raiders, horrible passing defense, powerful running attack. in my mind, I think both teams, they're going to attack each other relentlessly using the strengths and weaknesses the other possesses. And I think things are going to get crazy pretty fast, guys. Hopefully the Chargers don't, jump off this game with a really poor first quarter like they have been several weeks in the season, because I think the first quarter, things can get nuts really, really quick. And the Chargers are going to have to find a way to hit the ground running to stay ahead on this one. Because I think the Raiders are going to find some early success on the ground. The Chargers are going to have to match that with early success through the air. So, Joe, if you're out there, don't make me roll the Joe show in this week's stream. We can't see that, especially as often as we've seen in the first quarter. That could be our deathbed right there. That could be the nail in the coffin if we don't get off to a strong start. Because the Raiders' ground game, that's a lot easier to get off the ground, ironically, than it is the passing game, okay? So with that, here's my score prediction. Things are going to get crazy really fast here, guys. And I am predicting over 60 points scored total for this game. My score prediction for this one's going to be Chargers 35, Raiders 31. Narrow victory, right? Yeah. It wouldn't be a Chargers game experience without that premium anxiety, nail-biting ending, wouldn't it? And I think it's going to go down to that again. Right? I think it's going to come down to that one score again. Behind Jacobs, the league-leading rushing attack versus the Chargers' league worst run defense. I think the Raiders are going to explode onto this scene offensively. I think it's going to be a tough-fought match in terms of points scored. But that goes both ways, right? Behind Justin Herbert's top 5 quarterback arm against a Raiders' bottom of the league passing defense, I'd also expect the Bolts to keep pace with the Raiders point-wise. But I think we'll see a lot more scoring drives for both teams than anyone expects this week. I've seen a lot of predictions where it's in the low 20s, even in the teens. I think a lot of points are going to be scored this week. Now, I think if anything, it's going to be a very fun game to watch, right? But in the end, I am confident that the Chargers can take down the 4-7 Raiders. They're very much so not a complete team. And I think the Chargers can definitely find a way to edge themselves out. But again, I can't stress this enough, Chargers fans. I don't see this matchup as foolproof at all. Sure, I think the odds are for the Chargers, but the Raiders' offense is something to really take seriously, especially with that premier running attack, which I would say is probably a bit more balanced than they give them credit for. That passing attack has also been very consistent this last month or so. But right now, the Chargers 6-5. The Chargers have to find a way to win this game. It is definitely a must-win. Because like I mentioned, a loss here only opens the door for the Raiders, who would only be a game behind if they do find a way to take down the Chargers. It would be what, at 5-7 to the Chargers 6-6? That's too scary for me, man. And this game, so important, because even on the opposite end of it, this game could really help the Chargers close the door on that possibility altogether. They go up to 7-5, Raiders down to 4-8. I think you firmly keep the Raiders in third place of the AFC West. But a lot is at stake here, because as of right now, the threat is very real. Let's hope the Chargers, Staley, Herbert, every Bolt in the locker room on the roster is ready to fight, because as it may be the most important remaining game on the schedule this season, they've got to find a way to pull this one out. They could be playing for their postseason right now. The Raiders are a must-win week, and I hope the Chargers are ready. If anything, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game and very, very exciting. Well, guys, let me know your score predictions in the comment section below. Let me know your overall thoughts on this matchup. Very big game. Chargers must win right here. But I think, if anything, it's going to be very exciting. So you guys let me know some of the big things you expect to see in this game, as well as your score prediction. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Make sure to hit up the link in the description for the giveaway for the Justin Herbert. Make sure you are subbed, especially if you liked what you saw here. Sub us on the way out. But make sure you are subbed for that giveaway after hitting up that link. And then crew members, get ready for the giveaway, the Khalil Mack jersey as well. Then lastly, I'm going to mention this one more time because, again, I think this could be a very fun week to get involved. Underdog Fantasy, use code Director to match your first deposit up to $100. I'm going all in. Not really all in, but I'm putting a big risk out there this week. You guys let me know what you're doing. Hit me up in Twitter if you guys want to show me some of your things there. But like I mentioned throughout this whole video, I think we can cause a mistake by Derek Carr. I think Gerald Everett's going to see a big day with that tight end always being good versus the Raiders. I think Justin Herbert, who's never thrown for less than 300 yards at Allegiant Stadium, goes for over 288. I think Josh Jacobs, at absolute, probably one of the locks of the week, puts up over 90 yards rushing. And then Josh Palmer, I think, as a more featured player this week, does put up more than 55 receiving yards. I think that was all pretty easy for me. So you guys let me know what your thoughts are on that. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Happy holiday season to everybody. Good luck to everybody in the giveaways. We'll catch you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Cannot wait for the stream on Sunday, man. Oh, we're going to need every Chargers fan not at the game attending and screaming their faces off. It's Raiders week, baby, in a must-win situation.